right, we'll start with this. Well, things are getting nasty between Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. Eddie Hearn, Savannah's promoter. In so many words, Clarissa said, Savannah Marshall can't fuck with me. Too slow. I'm happy she called me out, but she doesn't possess the skills to do anything with me at this time. She don't got what it takes to beat the GWOAT. Eddie Hearn, if you love me, pay me.
Shouldn't you direct that comment to your own promoter?
She added, Eddie can say what he wants. He knows, he gets the money right, that the Great White Hope will be no more. To which Savannah Marshall replied, the Great White Hope wouldn't matter if I was purple or green. You're still getting knocked out. Stevie Levy, up-and-comer Stevie Levy, replied to the exchange via her Instagram account, said, mate, if you called her the Great Black No Hope, there would be global protests.
Told you it's getting nasty.
And whatever this snowballs into, if it snowballs into anything, don't forget who got the ball rolling. Don't forget where the whole thing started. The first mention of race in reference to a Shields versus Marshall fight came from Clarissa Shields. At no point did either Savannah Marshall or Eddie Hearn make any mention of
touchy subject.
As stated, if this develops into the same kind of toxic vitriol that the boxing world saw in reference to the Larry Holmes versus Jerry Cooney fight, don't forget who started it all.
Wouldn't be the first time that's happened.
And I don't know if this is just Clarissa Shields' way of promoting the fight by playing the heel, or if this is just how she feels underneath it all, if this is how she behaves herself behind closed doors. Though one way or another, a toxic comment like this warrants a toxic response, and that's what it's going to get. And maybe Clarissa Shields' comment is just a reflection of the times and the environment that she's in. The problem with that, however, is that that's not Savannah Marshall's environment, nor is it her problem. This is going to cause a lot of people out there to ask a very uncomfortable question, a question that I'm not even comfortable addressing here on this channel.
But it's still a question that a lot of people are going to ask.
Whether I'm comfortable with it or not, whether you're comfortable with it or not. If Savannah Marshall said anything along the lines of what Clarissa Shields said,
could she get away with it?
Would she get away with it? I don't even want to get too into that subject. That's another conversation altogether. And you can just chalk this up to the crassness of Clarissa Shields, the classless Clarissa Shields. Because this was just about a boxing match after all.
And she seems to want to turn it into something else.
The way that Deontay Wilder wanted to turn that first Tyson Fury fight into something else. Something that it wasn't. There's been a lot of talk about this fight lately. Rightfully so, because Savannah Marshall was just in action, and she looked the part yet again. Every time she enters that ring, she looks the part, looks destructive.
Naturally, that starts the Shields fight conversations.
I love Clarissa Shields. You don't know what love is. You're disrespectful. And you're not an advocate for women's boxing for the pay disparity. You're not. Because you wouldn't have sent the offer you sent to my team after I mentioned Katie Taylor. And just to be clear, I mentioned the fight with Katie Taylor to scare him. Because he know I can make 147. And as soon as I got talking about Katie Taylor, that's when he sent the contract or sent the offer for me to fight Marshall.
Oh, he tried to dead the Katie Taylor talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Because he know that if Katie Taylor thinks too hard about it, we may end up in the ring together. Exactly. So he got to convince her, oh no, let's not go to 147, But that's when we start throwing up Marshall name. Man, I'm like, that's cool.
I can't even begin with everything that's wrong about what Clarissa Shields said in that excerpt from her latest interview, addressing a potential Savannah Marshall fight, addressing her willingness to fight Katie Taylor. I mean, in all honesty, I can't begin to address everything that's wrong with what she said. You're saying that Eddie Hearn is not a real advocate for women's boxing unless he pays you whatever the fuck you ask him for, even though he's not your promoter.
Why don't you ask your promoter to pony up the money you want to make?
The sheer levels of self-entitlement associated with Clarissa Shields' comments in that soundbite are nauseating. You're saying that unless he pays you, a fighter he doesn't promote, the way that you want to be paid, he's not a real advocate for the sport, even though he's doing more for the sport than anybody.
Everybody else.
And that that is not intended to either belittle or diminish the efforts of everyone else out there who's an advocate for the sport and is working to grow it. It's just stating a simple fact. Nobody is pouring more money into the sport of women's boxing than Eddie Hearn.
And he doesn't owe you anything.
You're not his fucking fighter. Savannah Marshall, Katie Taylor, Shannon Courtenay, Ellie Scottney, Ramla Ali, April Hunter, Cecilia Breakers, Jessica McCaskill. Those are his fighters. You're not his fucking fighter. He doesn't have a fiduciary duty to you.
Saying all that shit about Eddie Hearn, why doesn't she say that shit about her own promoter?
Why isn't she shaking her fists at him, telling him to get her more money? He's the one who's got a fiduciary duty to pay her to operate in her best interests, not Eddie fucking Hearn.
The knife of this broad.
And never mind that Clarissa Shields, in so many words, admitted that she was offered the Marshall fight and she turned it down. Obviously, because she doesn't like money. She commands much bigger purses than that. That's why she parted ways with Showtime, right?
Right.
Because of how much money she commands. You can't go to the fucking media looking for sympathy, admitting that the people at Showtime were looking to cut your purse in half from $300,000 to $150,000. You can't do this and turn around and turn your nose up at the kind of money Eddie offers you. In all likelihood, he probably offered you more than they did.
Probably offered you more than what you just made with Marie Eve Care.
And why does she think that regularly name-dropping Katie Taylor in interviews and articles is at all a good idea? Who does she think is going to give her who debuted as a super middleweight, Katie, who debuted as a lightweight, who does she think is going to give her credit for chasing around a lightweight?
Should we be lining up David Benavidez and Teofimo Lopez for a fight?
I've said this before and I'll say it again. Even if she can cut down to 147 pounds, it's still a tactless and tacky move.
Yeah, sycophants on Twitter might think it sounds good.
The social media support group that was eerily absent when it was time to pull their wallets out and buy her fight.
You really think you're gonna get somewhere pandering to those people?
Listen, I'm just gonna give it to you straight, because it's the only way I know how to give it to you. This fight don't happen next, and I don't think this fight happens this year. I think that in the year of 2021, Savannah Marshall will fight 2 more times before the year is out, and that will cause her notoriety, her marquee value to go up.
I think so.
I think that Clarissa Shields' marquee value is contingent upon her success in the octagon, in the cage, because she's already done what she can in the squared circle. People at Showtime still thought it prudent to cut her purse in half.
They wouldn't have done that if she was a moneymaker.
And everybody's bottom line in the sport of boxing is making money. This is pugilism. This is prize fighting, after all. Given the commitment that Clarissa Shields has made to the PFL, the fact she entered into a contract with them, now her marquee value is contingent upon what success she does or doesn't have in the octagon, assuming she doesn't abandon that endeavor altogether to see what she can still do in the sport of boxing. Though without a major financier, like a Showtime, like a Fox, you can only get so far. Beyond the very brash comments that Clarissa Shields has become known for making, comments she's free to make because this is a free country, and she's free to make those comments just as easily as you and I are free to feel about them however the fuck we want to feel about them. There's definitely a sense of entitlement at work here that is not in keeping with the sport's infrastructure. You can be the most accomplished amateur. You might even be the most accomplished woman boxer. I mean, in some circles, that's believed. But in this business, in this industry, you get what you generate, regardless of what your accomplishments are. Chocolatito's a more accomplished boxer than Danny Garcia, but which one of those 2 guys do you think saw $1 million face?
Guillermo Vergandia was more accomplished than Leo Santa Cruz.
More skilled too, in my opinion, but Leo still got paid better than Rigo. That's what's going on here with Clarissa Shields. She's got plenty of accomplishments, amateur and professional, but she doesn't draw. And, you know, a part of the reason that she doesn't draw is because she's not a very likable person.
It's really only part of it.
As there are many other factors at work there. Look, Clarissa Shields doesn't have to bend for anybody. Me or you, or Eddie Hearn. She can do and say whatever the fuck she wants, and people can react to it however they see fit. Though when I see this, and you'll excuse me for stating the obvious, I don't think she's doing herself any favors with this stuff. I don't think she's gonna make any new fans behaving this way. I don't. And if you can't make new fans, how are you supposed to increase your marquee value, your drawing power? Because this is about money more than it's about anything else.
Clarissa ain't got to bow to me or you.
But that's two-way street. Neither me or you have to bow to her, and neither does Eddie Hearn or Savannah Marshall. It's just a simple case of causality. If you don't like that, you better wake up and smell the coffee, sweetheart, because this is the real world. And finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, Tyson Fury on the Anthony Joshua fight, I think it will 100% happen, and I think we're going to know within a couple of days where and when. I'm confident this fight's going to get made in the next few days. There can only be one champion, one face, one name, like Deontay Wilder said. But unfortunately for him, it ain't him, because I've already smashed him. I've got no love for Deontay Wilder at all. I think he's a piece of shit. But I don't think any of the other heavyweights can beat Deontay Wilder. There's only one man who can beat him, and that's me. I think he annihilates the rest of them.
There's not much new ground to cover here.
Not much. In reference to this subject, the subject of Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury and the fight being finalized, there's not much new ground to cover here except addressing the full 180 that Tyson Fury has had in just a matter of days. But I told you what I thought that was, what I still think that is. Nerves, jitters,
Anxiety.
with Frank Warren and Bob Arum sitting on their hands, waiting for Eddie Hearn to get the job done. Tyson Fury probably calls those guys for what's supposed to be a progress report, and they don't have anything to tell him until Eddie has something to tell them. Thus, this caused frustration to the Furies. Tyson Fury, Big John Fury. I don't think Tyson Fury handles pressure very well, and that won't be the first time you've heard me say that.
Said it before.
Tyson Fury performs at his best when he's the underdog, when the burden of expectation is not placed upon him. The burden of expectation wasn't placed upon him in the Klitschko fight, and the burden of expectation wasn't placed upon him in either of the Deontay Wilder fights.
There were risks.
There always are. This is prize fighting after all. This is pugilism, so there were risks, but the burden of expectation wasn't placed on Tyson Fury in the Klitschko fight. He was the underdog in that fight. He was the underdog in the first Wilder fight as well.
You forget?
His novel approach in the second fight, I think that was rather unexpected. When I heard that Tyson Fury's plan of action for the rematch was to come forward on Deontay Wilder and look for the knockout, I didn't actually believe he was going to do that.
But he did.
I don't think a lot of people believed he was going to do that. Maybe a couple of outliers. But for the most part, the notion that Tyson Fury was going to come forward on the guy who dropped him 2 times in their first outing, in their first fight, the idea that he was going to do that, I think Tyson Fury knew.
They won't expect it.
That a lot of people out there, Deontay Wilder included, they didn't actually believe he was going to do that. And in that way, he approached the rematch with an element of surprise. Thus, the burden of expectation was once again not placed upon him.
It wasn't his burden to bear.
The only real time that Tyson Fury was under pressure to deliver, pressure to catch lightning in a bottle more than once, was ahead of what was supposed to be the second Klitschko fight. The second Klitschko fight that never was, that never materialized, because Tyson Fury, in so many words, was mentally unfit.
That was the story, whether you believe it or not.
Do you believe that he had a full mental breakdown, that his mind split under the pressures of having to deliver, being investigated by UCAD,
Remember that?
being a social pariah for very inflammatory comments he made in the past? Whether you believe he mentally cracked as a result of all of that, or you believe that he willfully sabotaged the rematch. He just didn't want to have it. He wasn't sure if lightning could strike twice. Either way, it all denotes the same thing, an inability to deal with pressure.
That inability to deal with pressure was on display the last couple of weeks.
Where Tyson Fury waited quite impatiently for there to be progress with the site deal, the location, what is to be the location of the match. He seemed ready to walk away from the whole goddamn jackpot. The pressure of waiting, the pressure of not knowing when it's been over 12 months since you had a fight.
And the sigh of relief once news arrives.
Of having an actual point of reference for what is next. I don't believe that Tyson Fury has the mental stability to sit idly waiting for things to happen. I think he needs something to channel that energy into. And that explains why his demeanor has changed very quickly.
Which is good news for everybody.
But not just anybody. There are those out there, a small contingent, who are displeased with this news, because essentially what it is confirmation that Deontay Wilder won't be fighting Tyson Fury for a third time in the near future, if at all. Well, you heard what Tyson Fury had to say about Deontay Wilder. As a means to stroke his own ego, he says nobody else can beat him, but I did smash him. He has no respect for Deontay Wilder. He views him as a piece of shit. We know what that's about. The accusations, the allegations that have been levied against him by Deontay Wilder and his team for the last 12 months.
None of which was substantiated.
Every single narrative, they were spoon-fed by the usual suspects, and their particular brand of propaganda, their clickbait, has fallen by the wayside. They would have had Deontay Wilder's biggest fans, his supporters, believe that a third fight was underway, and that's not the case.
Sorry.
You guys have got a lot of explaining to do.
Guys gonna be alright?
There's a cluster of American fight fans out there who still seem to think that this country is the center of the boxing universe, and in the time that I've been uploading content to this channel, I've regularly told you guys that this ain't your father's era of boxing, and boxing is more a world sport here today than it ever was before, with fighters, great fighters, coming from around the world,
Everywhere.
making their names. The biggest fight in the sport of boxing here today, in April of 2021, is the fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. No other fight like that fight here today that is made or can be made would get you the payout that that fight gets you. No fight like that fight, no other fight, will get worldwide interest the way that that fight will, even if it doesn't involve an American fighter, and even if some of or many of the Americans don't care much for it. It's not important anymore. America has been the birthplace to some of the greatest fighters the sport has ever seen. But things change, and sometimes they change for the better. That's okay. No cause for concern, no need for sour grapes. Just sit back and enjoy the show.
An American fighter had this opportunity, and he blew it.
The one still picking up the pieces of his now shattered ego, and what fragments of it remain.
That's his fault. He had this opportunity.
The show must go on, and the show will go on.
But I've been trying to tell you guys.